I'm Sally Baudet. Welcome to Global Business Europe. Our top stories. China's foreign trade has surged with high-tech and green energy products leading the charge. Falling jobs, rising markets. Wall Street rallies after weak employment data eases fears of another Fed rate hike. And ready for takeoff. China ramps up its low-carbon jet fuel projects, charting a course towards climate-conscious air travel. Now, China's foreign trade remains strong, despite shipping disruption in the Gulf region and ongoing trade friction with the United States. In the first 7 months of 2026, China's trade in goods was over $4.3 trillion. That's up more than 17% year on year. In July alone, total trade was $674 billion, a jump of nearly 20%. Imports grew faster than exports, helping to narrow China's overall trade surplus. In the first 7 months, exports grew 14%, imports increased 22%. In July alone, exports climbed nearly 18%, imports up 21%. Mechanical and electrical products accounted for nearly two-thirds of China's total exports. Shipments of electric vehicles, lithium batteries and wind turbines recorded strong growth. The exports of 3D printers, industrial robots and ships also increased. Now, the figures also reflect strong global demand linked to artificial intelligence and high-tech manufacturing. China's exports of integrated circuits nearly doubled in the first 7 months of this year. In July, they surged more than 166% from a year earlier. If we look at China's trading partners, double-digit growth with ASEAN, Africa and Latin America. Trade with the European Union also expanded. Trade with the United States declined, but only slightly. Gerard Lyons is a senior independent director of the Bank of China here in the UK. Hi, Gerard. Thanks so much for joining us. It looks like a resilient picture, but what does it say to you?
Well, it certainly is a resilient picture on the trade side for China. It reflects sort of wider concerns about the Chinese economy. But in terms of the trade performance, it's a particularly strong picture. I think the three issues really from the trade side are the scale, what and where. The scale, as you've highlighted, it's a pretty impressive performance on exports. In terms of what, China has suddenly changed in the last few years from being focused on low-cost type exports, benefiting in the past from cheap labour in China, and it's certainly an indication now that China has moved up the value curve with a lot of emerging technologies and a lot of high-quality exports. And also the where is very interesting, particularly in the wake of the trade sanctions last year with the States. It's a clear indication that China has been able to diversify not only to the regions you've mentioned, but in particular, I would stress, the European picture looks quite interesting for the future. So scale impressive, the quality of the exports improving, and they've diversified to ASEAN, to emerging economies and to Europe in particular.
China's imports grew more than its exports.
Yeah.
Do you see that as a problem?
No. Well, China's overall trade picture is quite impressive. It exports generally far more than it imports. The bounce up in the imports is a positive signal. One of the interesting challenges about the Chinese economy this year has been the two-speed nature of the economy. In the first half of the year, the economy slowed significantly between the first and the second quarter, still had 4.7% growth in the first half of the year. But the latest indicators suggest that China will be at the lower end of the 4.5% to 5% growth range for this year. But what we've seen, in addition to that strong export picture and strong trade picture that we talked about, has been pretty sluggish domestic growth. Consumption really only ticking over, weakness in the construction sector. If there's any indication of imports picking up, and if that's mirrored also by stronger retail sales in coming months, for instance, then that would be a positive sign. But for the moment, I wouldn't overstress the import picture because it's still against the backdrop of what I would say is a sluggish domestic demands picture.
Fair enough. A quick comment on the fact that trade with the US only declined a little bit. If you look at the barriers and the tussles that are going on currently, and that trade with Europe has grown fairly substantially, I think just under 10%.
Yeah. I think this is a legacy of the involution that President Xi Jinping and others have talked about over the last 24 months. China's export sector is reflecting the strength of its industrial sector. And what we're seeing on the export side is a changing composition of China's exports, not only in terms of where it's going to, but in terms of the export composition towards Europe in terms of electric vehicles, more linked to technology. And that's an indication of how the competitiveness of the Chinese economy has changed. And China is now becoming very competitive in higher quality type of goods as it attempts to move up the value curve. Of course, it's helped also by the currency, the Chinese currency, also being very competitive. So the composition change in exports is very evident.
Thank you so much for your time. Really interesting analysis. Gerard Lyons, Senior Independent Director of the Bank of China here in the UK. Now, part of China's fruitful trade relationship with ASEAN countries is down to food imports. Our reporter, Wang Tianyu, visited the China-Thailand border to find out which Thai products are whetting the appetites of Chinese consumers.
This might be China's busiest port for imported tropical fruits. 1 out of every 3 durians entering China come through here, Youiguan Port, in English, Friendship Pass. It sits on China's deep south border with Vietnam, linking the country to the whole of Southeast Asia. Hundreds of trucks carrying durian and other tropical fruits pass through here every day, and they are randomly inspected for safety. Customs officers test for pests and quality. That keeps every shipment moving smoothly to markets all across China. And this year, there's more fruit than ever. Heavy rainfall across Southeast Asia has boosted the harvest.
This year, fruit imports through Youiguan Port have been strong. In the first half of the year, we brought in fruit worth over 12 billion yuan, or about $1.8 billion, up 40.8% from last year. Durian led that growth. It made up almost 90% of all fruit imports here.
Durian imports through this port jumped nearly 56% in the first 6 months of 2026, and officials expect that pace to continue. More durian from Vietnam is on the way in the coming months.
Our durian business has grown about 15% this year. Right now, most of what we're bringing in still comes from Thailand.
And it's not just happening here. Across China, durian imports grew at almost the same pace as Youiguan, up more than 57% in the first half of this year. New rail links like the China-Laos Railway are opening up even more routes for Southeast Asian fruit to reach Chinese consumers faster. Wang Tianyu, CGTN, Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region.
Now, U.S. stock markets opened higher on Friday after a weaker than expected jobs report eased fears of a Fed interest rate hike. For more, Mitch McCann joins us from New York. Hello, Mitch. So happy Friday to you. How are the markets looking?
Yeah, hi. Happy Friday from New York, Sally. Look, the markets are performing well today, and part of that has to do with this jobs report, as you mentioned, which actually showed more job losses than expected. I'll talk about why that's good news for investors in a moment. But if we look at the markets as of a couple of moments ago, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which has had a very strong week, it was up 72 points. The S&P 500 up 0.5%, and the Nasdaq, another strong performance to begin Friday. It was up 1.22% a short time ago. So a strong start to end the week here in New York. Now, this jobs data released this morning, or the non-farm payrolls report, showed job losses in this economy of 23,000 jobs, which is very different, I had to say, to what economists had forecast would be the result. They had expected an addition of 83,000 jobs in the economy, so very different. Government job losses pulled the headline number down. Private sector hiring was also weak. Employers in the private sector adding only 30,000 jobs. Now, despite that gloomy result, the markets are up, and the reason for that is it makes it less likely that the Federal Reserve is going to raise interest rates while questions hang over the labour market. Investors feel that it's more likely the Fed's going to keep rates where they are when they next meet in September. But given that is still some time away, lots of data is still to come before them, and that decision could change. So a lot to happen in the interim.
We expect President Trump to meet with mining industry leaders a little later. What are we expecting from that?
Yeah, Donald Trump's going to meet from with a number of executives from these businesses today. They include Rio Tinto Group, BHP Group, and US Rare Earth Minerals Incorporated, to name a few. Now, it comes at a time when the US needs more rare earth minerals, and one reason for that is related to reports this week that the United States has severely depleted its munitions stockpile during the war in Iran, and it needs to build that back up. Now, that is a process which could take a long time. It could take years, and it reportedly requires minerals to manufacture things like precision-guided missiles, fighter aircraft, and armoured vehicles, to name a couple of examples where they would need those minerals. Reuters is also reporting that a handful of deals and memorandums of understanding are set to be announced during that meeting today. This is really one area where the United States has seen China as the dominant player, and under Donald Trump they've worked hard to sort of rebuild a stockpile of critical minerals, signing a number of deals with various countries. So that is a continuation of the US efforts here.
We're hearing about Meta being fined hundreds of millions of dollars in New Mexico. They're also facing growing pressure in India. What can you tell us?
Yeah, they certainly are. Meta is up against thousands of lawsuits in this country at the moment, which have been filed by states, schools, school districts, teenagers that claim their apps, Facebook and Instagram, for example, are causing widespread harm. Now, this case in New Mexico saw the Mag7 company fined $567 million, and the majority of that money is going to harm reduction and social media addiction services. The judge in the case, when he ruled in this case, said although Meta is not alone in this regard, its social media platforms are significant in contributing factor to the current mental health crisis among New Mexico's youth, established by the evidence in the case. Now, Meta was already ordered to pay $375 million in New Mexico in March, and it's also in hot water, as you mentioned, in India. This comes after Meta restricted a Facebook post by Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, addressing Gen Z protests in July, and it also summoned regulators over concerns related to child abuse content. So many concerns for Meta about multiple lawsuits, not just the thousands here in the US, but also issues overseas.
Thank you so much. That is Mitch McCann in New York for us. The United States has put a 15% tariff on imported products made from polysilicon. China is the biggest producer of the raw material, which is used in the production of semiconductors and solar panels. The White House said the measure is designed to protect U.S. manufacturers from growing foreign competition. Chinese company Cambricon has recorded a 108% surge in revenue for the first half of 2026 to almost $890 million. The Chinese AI chip giant making the most of Beijing's push to keep AI hardware domestic. Year on year, profits jumped by 122% to $340 million. China set the course for a safer and greener civil aviation industry by 2030. A new 5-year development plan unveiled on Friday calls for conventional jet fuel to be gradually replaced with cleaner alternatives and for an aviation carbon market to be established. Well, sustainable aviation fuel is low-carbon fuel that can power an aircraft. It can be made from bio-based sources and recycled materials, such as used cooking oil and animal fats. China is expanding its clean jet fuel production as part of its latest 5-year development plan. In the first half of 2026, China launched 16 new projects, compared with only 4 across the rest of the world. State-owned companies account for nearly half of China's new clean jet fuel projects. That's helped triple production capacity plans compared with last year. China produces 1.7 million tonnes of clean jet fuel every year. It's a third of the world's total production. Of course, that's less than 1% of the actual amount of biofuel that would be required to power the entire aviation industry. The International Energy Agency estimates global demand for clean jet fuel could grow to 16 million tonnes of oil by 2030, with the EU, UK and other countries making it mandatory for use in fuelling planes. Sarah Wilkin is founder and CEO of Fly Green Alliance. It's a low-carbon travel and transport group based here in London. Hello, Sarah. First of all, why is the cost of this alternative fuel so incredibly high?
Yeah, it's a new technology. Just like any technology, it needs a lot of investment initially. Like any curve, it's hundreds and millions and going into the billions of investment. So right now, we are working on scales of economy in the industry. It's a new process, so it just costs a lot more.
Yeah. China's plans, they really ramped up production and they're really committed to it, even getting sort of state-owned enterprises to do that. Do you think that could play a part in ultimately bringing down the price?
The Chinese SAF right now is coming in a lot lower than the UK and Europe. There are now laws and mandates in the UK as well as EU. However, the EU producers are actually not able to produce it as low cost as China. So right now it is actually accelerating the type of SAF being made right now, and it is having a role in starting to bring that cost down.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit about some of the major airlines that are actually sort of topping up with a little bit of low-carbon fuel, but it's still sort of less than 1%. And I presume that cost is the major barrier there, or is it also about supply?
It's kind of a combination of both. It really is. If you know anything about aviation economics, the margins are very low. So if you then triple the cost of fuel, which is around 60% of overall cost anyway, it essentially makes flying very expensive and not democratic as it is wanted to be today. So it is a combination. However, the scale of production isn't as fast as wanted. We have mandates, but it is only for some regions. And actually, as you rightly said, we need a global supply. Therefore, it is about accelerating the production. Yeah. Now, actually, to build a production plant is taking around 2 years. However, getting that finance together and finding investment is actually taking. I've done the work in SAF for now 7 or 8 years with Fly Green Alliance, and I only just see it going into implementation now. So you can see it's long-term work that's happening.
All right, thank you so much. That's Sarah Wilkin, founder and CEO of the Fly Green Alliance. It's a low-carbon travel and transport group here in London. This is Global Business Europe. Still ahead, a World Cup with controversial last-minute changes and a multi-million-dollar prize pot up for grabs. Sound familiar? We have the latest at the Esports World Cup in Paris.
Everything is a business story.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Sally Burdett. Your headlines. China's foreign trade has surged with high-tech and green energy products leading the charge. Falling jobs, rising markets. Wall Street rallies after weak employment data eases fears of another Fed rate hike. And ready for takeoff, China ramps up its low-carbon jet fuel projects, charting a course towards climate-conscious air travel. The countdown is on for the World Cup final of China's biggest esports export, Honor of Kings. It's part of a multi-week tournament that draws millions of viewers worldwide and boasts a prize pot of $75 million. Sarah Coates is at the tournament in Paris.
Well, this really gives you a sense of just how big esports has become. More than 2,000 players from around 100 countries are competing right here in Paris with more than $75 million in prize money up for grabs. But the business behind esports goes far beyond what players can win here. Now, China is the world's largest esports market, and last year the industry there generated just over $4 billion alone, up more than 6% in a year. And perhaps the most striking figure is the size of the audience. China now has more than 495 million esports users, so competitive gaming is not just a form of entertainment, it's an enormous consumer market. And that's why investors, sponsors and even cities are paying much closer attention. Esports generates money through advertising, sponsorship, live streaming, ticket sales, gaming hardware and also merchandise, while it's driving tourism too. The King Pro League final in Beijing last year drew more than 62,000 spectators, with more than 85% of ticket holders reportedly travelling from outside the city, which then feeds into spending on hotels, restaurants and transport. Now, globally, the esports market was valued at around $2.6 billion last year, with some forecasts suggesting it could reach $12 billion by 2033. So what we're seeing here in Paris is part of a much bigger shift. The organisers are not simply selling gaming, they're selling live entertainment, sponsorship, tourism and access to a young, highly engaged global audience. And for China, the next major challenge is turning that enormous domestic market into an even bigger international business. Sarah Coates, CGTN, Paris.
To another exciting, perhaps more traditional sport. Formula One is back in the Spanish capital for the first time in 45 years for the Spanish Grand Prix in September. Bad Bunny and Shakira are headlining Madrid's festivities, but not everyone's on board. Our correspondent Ken Brown reports.
Ya llegamos a la Monumental.
A slick promo featuring Spanish Formula One legend Carlos Sainz and an immersive virtual lap around the brand new track has F1 fans revved up for the big show in Madrid this summer. Supporters are talking up the optics and the economics. The Madrid Chamber of Commerce arguing that it will bring over $500,000 and more than 120,000 visitors a year to the city. Well, we're here at the start and finish line of the 5.4-kilometre track, where we'll see F1 cars speed around at over 300 kilometres per hour. The idea was to take the track to the streets of Madrid in the style of Miami and Las Vegas, but not everyone is on board. Outside the launch, there's a small group of neighbours determined to make themselves heard.
We are not against F1, we are against the F1 circuit in this area, in our neighborhood, because it is built just 20, 30 meters away from our homes. It's going to cause more than 95 decibels of noise. It's creating a lot of chaos here in this area where we live and where we work also. And 700 trees have been cut.
The event is being held at Madrid's IFEMA Convention Centre, and organisers insist they are engaging with neighbourhood groups.
I don't need to convince them, because IFEMA has done that work with them now to engage with the community and explain the benefits of hosting a Grand Prix. Formula One is an economic driver. We actually find there's very little resistance now. It's much more in the vein of excitement.
Madrid is tapping into the global mega-event economy, welcoming box office draws like F1 and the Vegas-style residency model. Rather than one Bad Bunny or Shakira concert, there are now 10 or 12 straight performances, generating hundreds of millions of dollars. A growing trend that only looks set to accelerate. Ken Brown, CGTN, Madrid.
Well, let's take a look at some of the big business stories making headlines this Friday. US aviation regulators have ordered operators to inspect more than 470 Boeing 737 MAX jets for possible structural cracks. SK Hynix has approved a $38 billion investment to build 2 new memory chip plants in South Korea. Beijing has raised Housing Provident Fund loan limits for home buyers as part of broader measures to support the property market. A US court has rejected President Trump's $400 million White House ballroom project. Shanghai. And now, some exciting news. Shanghai is going to host the next World Skills competition, dubbed the the Olympics of Skills. The tournament brings together competitors from about 80 countries across dozens of technical disciplines. One of those skills is cooking. Our correspondent Zhang Yue takes us to the Shanghai Trade School for a closer look.
Gold in bakery, gold in patisserie and confectionery. At the last World Skills competition in Lyon, France, China swept 2 events deeply rooted in European pastry tradition.
We kept hearing China, China announced over and over again, and we were absolutely thrilled.
Awards like these are not easy to win. The skill required to win don't appear overnight. So what does it take to become a world champion?
There are no shortcuts. You have to put in the hours.
And much of that hard work begins here. This is Shanghai Trade School. It has trained bakery competitors for 5 consecutive World Skills cycles. And since the last competition, it has served as one of Shanghai's main training bases for baking, patisserie and confectionery, and cooking. The competitors it helped prepare for Shanghai 2026 have now moved on to full-time training with China's national team. Back at the school, teachers are already working with another generation of students who hope to compete in the future.
First, they have to keep refining their skills and perfecting their work. Second, they need to be adaptable. They have to adjust quickly to the competition environment so they can perform at their best.
At World Skills, knowing how to cook a good dish is only the beginning. Competitors must prepare it within a strict time limit, using unfamiliar ingredients, equipment, and workspaces, all while meeting international standards for flavor, texture, temperature, and presentation. There is only one way to get a competitor to a point where all this is automatic. That's practicing and drilling again and again.
Every day, they eat the dishes they cooked. Even if it's a great dish, imagine eating the same thing for 10 days straight. You'd get sick of it, right? But that's part of the training. Eventually, it becomes kind of like muscle memory. You know exactly how salty, how sweet, how fresh it should taste. That's your benchmark.
Most will find this kind of repetition exhausting and possibly a little boring. But if you ask any students preparing for the next World Skills cycle, that was not how they describe it.
See, some turn out beautifully golden while others don't. That's what we are learning to control.
2 years ago, competitors in Lyon created the Eiffel Tower. And in September, we'll get a chance to see what they'll cook up for the competition in Shanghai. Zhang Yue, SMG International for CGTN.
Your headlines again. China's foreign trade has surged with high-tech and green energy products leading the charge. Falling jobs, rising markets, Wall Street rallies after weak employment data eases fears of another Fed rate hike. And ready for takeoff, China ramps up its low-carbon jet fuel projects, charting a course towards climate-conscious air travel. That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks so much for watching. Up next on CGTN is Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow. Do take care from all of us here in London. Goodbye.